welcome to Swim Chats, a podcast about ocean swimming. I'm Shona Riddell, a writer, former journalist and swimmer from Wellington, Aotearoa, New Zealand. For each episode, I talk to a different guest from our swim community. Remember, if you have any questions, thoughts or suggestions, you can email me at swimchatswithshona@gmail.com or follow Swim Chats on Instagram. Please hit the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And you can also leave a 5-star rating, which helps more people to discover the podcast. And if you know people who you think would enjoy it, please tell them about Swim Chats. Thanks for listening, enjoy the water, and here's today's episode with cold water researcher Dr. Heather Massey. So Heather, first of all, welcome to the Swim Chats podcast. It's a real pleasure to meet you and get to speak to you today.
Oh, thanks very much. Thanks for the invite.
So I'll just explain for you and for listeners. I first came across your research a few years ago when I was doing my master's degree, which was in science communication. And I was doing a lot of writing about the sea and learning about the sea. And it was also the time that I started getting into the water and learning how to swim properly and swimming past summer, which is felt like a big deal at the time. And of course, I noticed things that were happening to my body at the time, like what it feels like to get into water that's a bit colder, and also what it feels like to get out of water that's a bit colder. And you're sort of learning all these things as you go. And so, reading your research papers, which I'll link to in the show notes, really sort of helped me understand. And they were written in a really accessible way. Like, not all academic papers are. But yeah, I know you've become sort of a media spokesperson for the effects of cold water on the body. Sorry, that's a really long monologue from me. But yeah, it's just a real pleasure to get to talk to you. I was just saying before we started recording, I've written a lot of questions, so I'll try and prioritize them. But I'll just explain. You're in the UK, and it's currently summer there. It's middle of winter here when we're recording this. So in the sea in Wellington, it's about between 11 and 12 degrees Celsius. It will probably get a bit colder before the winter's out. Just curious to know, what's the temperature of the water where you are right now?
Oh, okay. So where we are, we're on the south coast of the UK in Portsmouth, and the water temperature varies um, depending on where you are. So it can be between about 15 and about 20 degrees, depending on where you are. Inland waters will be much warmer. So some of the lakes that are close by are up to 22, 23 degrees Celsius. Um, so yes, it varies greatly, and we've also just had some pretty intense flash storms, and that takes the water temperature down quite dramatically. So you can take it down by 2 or 3 degrees just overnight.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. And that can
Mm.
catch people out, can't it, a little bit? But we'll talk
Oh,
about that.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So before we talk about your research, let's talk about you as a swimmer, because I know you're an open water swimmer. I was doing a bit of Googling. You competed in the World Ice Swimming Championships. Is that the right name, in Germany, in 2017? And
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
yeah,
um, yeah,
amazing.
that seems like a lifetime ago. Well, yeah, it nearly was. Um, yeah, it's a very interesting experience. But I just praise that I've done a lot of outdoor swimming. I've swum all my life, and I've been lucky to be in locations where I could do that and have access to water which was fairly safe to swim in. And so I'd got many years of adaptation and training before I decided to go anywhere near colder winter temperature waters. Um, and yeah, it was a quite a well set up event. We had to fill in all medical forms before we went. We had a medical the night before we were due to swim, and then an acclimatization swim just to check that we were okay with the temperatures. And it was a very interesting experience. I did compete. I did okay. I'm never going to be the fastest swimmer. I'm a value for money swimmer, definitely. Um,
I
but I
can relate
have
to that.
I have noticed that I've got, and I still have a numb finger from turning on the walls. So it was a 25-meter pool in effect that we swam in that was kept ice free by lots of pumps overnight, so that the water didn't freeze. But the water was, I think it was zero point 0.4 to 1 degree Celsius, so it's really quite bitterly cold, and the air
Wow.
temperature -14.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. So I still, to this day, when it's chilly and when it's cold, I still end up with a numb finger from that experience. It's left a mark, but it was a very interesting and experience if people want to do that. I did the 1K event. There's obviously shorter events that people could try, um, and I just, yeah, caution that it's something that you would build up to do, and it's not something you just decide to do straight away.
That is a really good point. Yeah, and especially because we're talking about cold water and the risks and the benefits on the
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah. And a couple of years after that, you swam the English Channel, which is also phenomenal. Congratulations. That was about 33 kilometers. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, well, I was slightly longer than that because of the tide. It's very tidal, as you can imagine. Um, so because I took longer, I was swept more with the tide. But 33 kilometers as the crow flies. Um, Again, a very interesting swim, and um, yeah, lots of training, lots of sacrifice. But it's something that, yeah, you don't enjoy doing it because there's very little to see or watch. Um, but strangely enough, I remember very little about it. I was so in the zone that you get into that sort of mind state where you just keep going. You've got this. I was quite driven to achieve this, and I had sufficient support to do it. So yeah, it was really interesting.
Wow, that's incredible. I have heard that from other marathon swimmers that you can go into a sort of trance or state while you're swimming. A couple of episodes ago, we spoke to Philip Rush, who lives here in Wellington.
Oh,
Yeah, and so
oh
he's
wow.
yeah, he's the record holder for the triple crossing. Yeah, and so
Yeah,
he's talking to us about that, and so
yeah.
I think that was overnight as well.
Yes, my most of mine was overnight.
Oh
But
right.
yeah, you can start to get into sort of a very closed trance like, and there have been cases of where people of swimmers have swum into unconsciousness as well. So it's something that you do need adequate support for. It's not something you can just go and do.
Yeah.
People have tried to do that, but you do need the right pilots, the right support crew, the right training to be able to do it. So, to guard against these things, swimmers going doing these very long swims do need to be looked after. They may think that they know what they're doing, but they do need looking after.
Yeah, I think everybody needs a bit of looking after
Oh yeah,
in the water.
definitely.
So you research cold water swimming. Did you become a researcher because you had questions as a swimmer that you couldn't find the answers to? Is that how your research started?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, as I say, I've been lucky to be an outdoor swimmer most of my life, but although I've not really called it that, I've just been, just swim outdoors. Um, and but yeah, sort of, I've managed to mold a career around something that's quite a hobby and sort of develop from there. And yet I couldn't find the answers, and so I thought, well, let's go and speak to the people that immerse people safely, and I've worked very been very lucky to work with Mike Tipton, and at the University of Portsmouth here in the UK for a number of years around water safety. And so that's where we come from to start with, is a position of, if we can do something safe, and then what are the potential benefits of that? And we know quite a lot about the harms that can take place, and the unfortunate, the preventable deaths that occur every year, both here in New Zealand and in the UK. But we know a lot of people have suggested that they have benefit from taking part in outdoor swimming, and so that's the next big thing: is why are these people experiencing benefit? And there's no science behind that as such. There's lots of theory, and lots of people making claims that they have. experience some positive benefit. And it's not to belittle their claims, it's just the science has not caught up with it. And so that's where I'm kind of at, is with this, where there's a vacuum of no scientific evidence, we get lots of people coming in making wild claims. And so, what we need to do now is fill that vacuum with good, rigorous science to stop the wild claims being made. I we regularly experience and have contact from people that have, you know, clearly experienced some beneficial effect from their cold water swimming. What we need to do now is find out why they experience that effect and who it helps, because we do know that for some people going into cold water would not be something that's helpful at all. And if we know why it helps, then there may be other things that we can do that aren't cold water immersion, but use the same magic ingredients, for want of a better, very non-scientific phrase, but use those mechanisms, magic ingredients, and find activities that people can do that would support their health as well.
What you're saying leads very nicely into my next questions. So, one was about people who can't experience cold water immersion, or getting into a lake or the ocean. Is a cold shower beneficial? Because I personally find them very uncomfortable, but I love getting into the sea. It's for me, it's quite a different experience.
It definitely is a different experience, and yeah, you're right. Natural locations aren't accessible to everybody, and some people do swear by having a cold shower. Again, I agree, it's not for me, but that's possibly because we're both very lucky to have outdoor spaces that are safe to swim in regularly. Um, it won't be in terms of the cold shock response. Let's take it back to the initial immersion in cold water. So the cold shock response is that response where you take a big inspiratory gasp and then breathe very quickly afterwards. Your heart rate increases, and you'll get the superficial veins of the superficial blood vessels of the body will sort of constrict, and so the blood flow is restricted to the center of the body. That all happens very quickly as soon as you get into the cold water. If you're getting into a body of cold water, so just doing like maybe a head out dip in cold water, that response is maximized at water temperatures of 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Now, if you have a cold shower that's at fairly similar temperature, you won't have the same level of increase in heart rate or increase in that breathing response, purely because the surface area of which is immersed in the cold water is less. So it's all about this surface area that's immersed that's important there. So if you have a smaller surface area exposed, your cold shock response will be smaller. So I'm surmising, and lots of this is going to be supposition because we don't have the knowledge yet. But what we do know is that those individuals that see or have reported benefit have been those that have dipped or showered for short durations. Those that spend extended time in the water and get very cold tend not to have that same uh, beneficial effect. And so, what we're surmising is that if you're having a short cold shower, then that may have some beneficial effect. It might not be the same as if you were able to get into cold water fully. But again, this is still work that needs to be done properly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And is there a sort of a hard and fast definition for what is cold water? Is it water that's below 15 degrees Celsius? Or is cold water more of a subjective term?
It's definitely out for debate. So what we term thermoneutral water is about 35 degrees. So that's where you get into water and you'd neither lose nor gain heat. Your body temperature would stay the same. Now, we maximize the cold shock response at 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Um, Now, lots of people say, oh, well, cold water, therefore, is 15. But actually, we still get a cold shock response at much higher water temperatures than that. So we don't say what temperature is cold, but we
Mhm.
know that people can experience a cold shock response in swimming pool water. So that could be a heated swimming pool. So that could be 27, 28, 29 degrees Celsius. And in fact, we've got evidence of that from our labs showing people do have a cold shock response in that sort of temperature water. Not everybody, but some people do. So we don't have a strict definition of cold, although 15 is definitely cold. We do know that physiological responses occur at higher temperatures than 15 degrees. So just acknowledge that 15 is definitely cold, but we do know that warmer water temperatures are also cold too.
Right, that makes sense. And if I get into water, no matter what temperature it is, but if I start saying that I'm cold or worrying that I'm cold, does my body physically become colder? Have you measured that in terms of the just the I guess the trying to think of the word the sort of mental reaction we can have as well as physical?
That's a really interesting point. I've never really thought about that, to be honest. But it is interesting, and the only thing I can sort of relate that to is when I've been doing a number of, and this is personal experience as opposed to science. When I've been doing a number of training swims where maybe I've got bored or I've not been able to stay in the zone, and you start to stop more frequently. And in stopping, what you do is you aren't generating the same level of heat, and so you do get colder. I can imagine that if you're in that same mindset where you think, "Oh, I'm cold," you might end up stopping more if you are doing a longer swim, for instance, and so you will start to cool more quickly because of that process. So that's the only sort of thing I can think of. But it's a very interesting question. Um, and we do, thinking of it from a scientific point of view, we do know that psychology does influence your experience or the cold shock response itself. So we've done a number of experiments where we've sort of manipulated the sort of psychological variables. Um, so we've given some of our sports science, our PE students, some maths questions, and then immersed them in cold water. And we know that, yeah, obviously, maths questions for a sports science or PE student is going to be quite anxiety inducing. And you can actually extend the cold shock response by being in a more anxious state. Um,
Mm.
Equally, we know if we give people psychological skills training about and explain what the cold shock response is, and the fact that if they're well fit and healthy, it will just be an increase in heart rate and breathing, and they'll be fine thereafter. We can see that there's a reduction in their cold shock response. So there's definitely a psychological element to the physiological experience of being in the cold.
Yeah, right. And just a more general question that I was thinking, because you mentioned there are sort of gaps in a need for rigorous science, to establish, what's going on with our bodies and the cold water. And I was thinking, people have been getting into the cold water for centuries, but it feels like scientific research around it is a relatively new thing. Is that correct?
Um, uh, the science at the moment is mainly around the area of hazard and keeping people safe, and rightly that should be a good starting point. Um, but you're right. I mean, here in the UK, Dickens was extolling the virtues of cold therapies and cold water. We've had a long history of outdoor bathing, and then all of a sudden we went into swimming pools, and they were the end thing, and everyone disappeared from going into natural waterways. Um, but you're right. It is an understudied area. Um, uh, Possibly finance is the issue, and especially if it's something around lifestyle, around rather than any health benefits, it tends to be less prioritized in terms of research. So there's a number of reasons why it's not been looked at before, but now, specifically now that we are, we're more people are doing it than have done it before. We should be looking into these things, and we've now got more people expressing that they've received benefit, but we've also got more people on the influencer side trying to influence people, and so we need to sort of counteract that with good, hard, rigorous science to make sure that where there is benefit, we know who can benefit from that, rather than being pushed on everybody in an inaccurate and imprecise way.
And we haven't talked about afterdrop yet. And a lot of people learn about afterdrop the hard way, I think, by experiencing it.
Yeah.
You get into the cold water, you spend a few minutes in, and you think, okay, I'm cold enough, I'm getting out. And then you notice that after you get out, you continue to feel even colder than you were in the water. And that's afterdrop. Are there resources that you sort of recommend people direct themselves to learn more about afterdrop and cold water immersion in general? So they don't necessarily have to learn about it through experiencing it.
Uh, that's a good question. In terms of resource, uh, there's normally some good the Outdoor Swimming Society, which is a website, have some good resources about all experiences of cold water immersion. Um, and yeah, they have some good resources there that's worth having a look at. Um, they're some are written by the scientists, the medics, some are written from an experiential point of view. So definitely there's a lot out there on reputable websites. Outdoor Swimmer magazine have also written about afterdrop as well and continued cooling. Um, but yeah, but what is afterdrop? So um, when we go into cold water, we know that we're going to cool. Physics will dictate that we are going to cool, and we carry on cooling at a fairly similar rate when we get out of the water. That's the unexpected bit. But when you think about it, it's really logical. What you're doing when you go into cold water is you cool the skin initially, that causes a cold shock response. Then you start to cool the superficial nerves and muscles. So that makes us all a little bit stiff and we can't coordinate so well. And then we start to cool the deep body. And we've got all these cold tissues. So when we get out of the water, they're not instantly becoming rewarmed. It takes a while. And while you're in the water, you might be shivering quite heavily or swimming. So you're producing a lot of energy, a lot of heat as a byproduct of your activity. When you get out of the water, you're doing far less activity. So your heat production will not be the same as it was when you're in the water. You might still be shivering, but it's not sufficient to immediately increase your body temperature. You've got all of this cold tissue that you've got to rewarm. So, in the meantime, while you're shivering away, your muscles are shivering away, your tissues are still cooling until you manage to turn the corner. That can be anywhere between 30 minutes, 45, 60 minutes in extreme cases, particularly ice mile or ice swimming. Um, and so, yeah, the the point of exit from the water is not the end of your cooling journey. I think that's really important to state, and it could be some time after. So there's a reason why we all stay behind, drink hot drinks, have a nice snack, and that is to look after each other and monitor that after drop. We're currently doing some experiments looking at the impact of continued cooling, so after drop in swimming, um, and looking at the effect of simulated driving performance. Um, we did some experiments a few years ago for the International Triathlon Union, looking at the effect of the water temperature for athlete welfare, and we found that the number of triathletes that did their cold swim and then had problems with bike handling as soon as they got off the bike was sorry, when they got on the bike was quite extraordinary. And so we also sort of wanted to think, well, why might that be? And then start to apply it to other sort of settings. And this is a classic where people might go for a swim in cold water and then immediately get in their car and drive somewhere. It's the same idea as getting on a bike. And so here in the UK, we don't keep statistics on why people might have accidents or problems in their car, other than if they've taken drugs or alcohol. So we don't know how many people are maybe having accidents or problems on the roads because they've just come out of the cold water. Um, but so we want to try and sort of make people aware that this could be a problem if it is a problem. And so what we're doing is we have a driving simulator where we get people to do several driving tests where they go around a series of cones and then onto a motorway. a highway, and we can monitor all the errors, crashes that they make, or inaccuracies in their driving, um, and monitor that before they go and do their cold swim, and then after, and then sometime after, about an hour after their swim as well. So we're just analysing those data now. So I don't have a big scoop to give to you. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I actually was one of the um, uh, sort of early trials just to see if it worked, and it was quite interesting how much my driving changed from immediately after I got out of the cold water. I could barely coordinate. Um, and we were using manual gearboxes as well, so we had to change gear. How I My focus was very much on my speed as opposed to being on what else was going on the road. So it's just amazing how much your focus changes just by being a little bit cold when you've got out of the water. So just to bring it back to the point is when you are going for a cold swim, um, if you do need to leave straight away, get somebody else to drive you home.
Yeah.
But also um, give it a little bit of time. Let that deep body cooling carry on, and hopefully get to the bottom before of the cooling before you start to think about, oh, okay, I am okay, I can drive. Because what we don't want to happen is people to go, yeah, I've just had a swim, get straight back in the car, and they feel fine, but 20, 30 minutes later, they're not really that sure how they've got home. That's not a strong place to be.
That's your research is so interesting, all the different experiments you're conducting. And actually, one of my questions was going to be like, how do you find people for your research?
How do we find people?
Yeah.
People actually
Or do
volunteer.
people
We do
find
some,
you?
yeah, they do, or yeah, they find me. We do some pretty invasive stuff. To be fair, measuring deep body temperature, well, there's no easy way of doing that. You either have to swallow pills or have to have probes down your throat, which is really uncomfortable for swimming, or you have to. This is going to be a bit crude, but stick a thermometer up your backside in order to accurately measure deep body temperature, especially when you go into cold water. A lot of these skin worn sensors will not provide you with accurate deep body temperature, and the ear thermometers won't either, because they rely on algorithms and technology which suggest a certain gradient between your skin and the deep body, which doesn't apply when you go into cold water. So yes, some of the experiments that we do are quite invasive, but they're all very applied. And that's, some people have come to us with experimental ideas that we then sort of work on with them, to try to bring to fruition. So yeah, it varies. Some of the questions we think, well, that would be interesting to do, and then we go and have a look and see if we can get it done. Others are brought to us to say, oh, do you want to try this? This looks interesting. And so yeah, we it's a mixture.
And I know that a lot of your research involves qualitative data, which is, um, you know, people telling you things or you're observing people. And a lot of your research involves the mental health benefits of open water swimming as well as physical. And so, how do you measure the mental health benefits when people tell you they feel happy or more alive or, um,
Uh,
yeah,
Okay, so yeah, particularly around mental health, I do both qualitative and quantitative research. In fact, I am mainly a quantitative researcher. I have another good colleague, Hannah Denton, who is a qualitative researcher, and so we work very closely together on these projects. Um, so, in terms of the quantifying changes in severity of depression or anxiety, there are validated scales which are people fill in a question and then they have a certain range of answers and they have a number assigned to them. So we can gain a quantitative assessment of somebody's symptoms of depression or anxiety. So that's kind of more the end I sit at, is the quantitative side. My colleague Hannah, who's an excellent qualitative researcher, looks at the narrative, the dialogue that people produce, the context, and I think that's really important to do both together. The reason being is that not everybody is a numbers person, and who's to say that the validated scales, whilst they're validated, they're not always they're not always super accurate, um, and people vary from day to day in terms of what the numbers that they would provide. Um, so it provides a number for those that require numbers. So lots of funding bodies, for instance, like to have numbers in order to be able to quantify change. Um, and particularly within this area, we want to know about some of the mechanisms and some of those magic ingredients, as I explained before. And you're not really going to get that from many of the validated or quantitative scales that could be used. You're going to get that from the narrative that people provide, the dialogue and the context. And so it's really important to have both so that we can say, well, we can see that there's been a change in this person. Um, they may, their symptoms may have reduced, and we can ask them, well, what's happened? They're not then going to be able to write hundreds of validated surveys to prove that point because some of the surveys don't exist. But we can gain some insight from their qualitative answers about what's going on there, what their experiences are. And I think that's really the key is having both.
Right. Yeah, that's really important. And is cold water, would you say it's physically, people talk about needing their cold water fix, like when they do it regularly. Is it is it something that is addictive, or is it more just so enjoyable that people want to keep doing it?
Um, uh, that's a really good question. I don't know what the answer to that is. So I'll go with some ideas of what it could be. Um, it's really challenging. Going into cold water is an extreme activity like rock climbing or parachute jumping or something like that. So you get a massive hit of stress hormones that circulate, and so that could be one cause. I don't know. We there have been studies that have measured hormone responses to cold water swimming, and you do see spikes in them. So it may be that people, once they've experienced it, they like the hit and they want to carry on. Uh, I do have to counter that by saying it's not for everybody, and there are people that have found it that they didn't like it, and so we do have to watch that we're not evangelizing being an open water swimmer. There are definitely people that have tried it and don't want to go back there, so I'm mindful of that. Um, Equally, uh, we think that the effects may not last too long, so it might be a few hours after going into the cold water um, that uh, that those hormone responses have settled back down again, and or there's the reset that they suggest that they've experienced has now sort of worn away. So people think, well, I've had a reset from that swim or that dip. I probably need to go and do it again. And so, yeah, there could be some reasons why it may be something that people want to do regularly and possibly find it addictive. Equally, what we tend to see is people pushing the boundaries as well. So they might start by dipping, they might want to do some more challenges. I fall into this bracket. So they'll do some more challenging swims, they'll go longer, they'll go colder, they'll go to more extreme, possibly some dangerous places to up the challenge, to up the intensity, to up the goal as well. So there's lots of and there's been an increase in the rise of swimming holidays as well, experiencing different locations. So it all feeds into the same sort of argument about people find it interesting or pleasurable. They want to try and incorporate it into their routine and possibly into their holiday as well, or be more defined by it. So it does build into that sort of psyche quite well.
Related to that, I remember in the early days of the pandemic, a few articles coming out of the UK that people were having ice baths in their backyards, like filling wheelie bins
Mm.
or barrels with ice water because they missed being able to go to their local pool or waterway. Did those stories surprise you, or is that more the exception rather than the rule, do you think, of what people were?
Um, it was definitely a phenomenon here in the UK, and it still is. Um, it's not one I would suggest is a good idea, just purely from the point of view of safety. We always dip or swim in groups so that there's some help should you have any problems or get into difficulty. Um, but yeah, it was a well trodden path here in the UK, and it's one we really tried to sort of say, look, hey, maybe just make sure there's somebody else in the house, or somebody else that can provide support if you need to go and do that. But again, there's some other things that go on in cold water that are very much people are not aware of. So things that people aren't aware of are the likes of, as you say, the afterdrop, but also something called non-freezing cold injuries, which is which can be we're not entirely sure, but we think it's a um, neurological as well as sort of vascular problem. So it affects both the nerves and the blood vessels of the periphery, particularly fingers, toes, any extremity really. And it can be quite painful. It causes swelling, and can cause long-lasting numbness or damage. Hence why my middle finger is still causing me some problems today. And we know it has a similar symptoms to or similar pain levels to Raynaud's, but it's very much not known about, and has only really been studied in military populations. Um, so we just need to raise awareness of some of these problems, and that actually, if you're doing something like this on your own, then there may be longer term consequences that um, and safety implications that you need to be aware of.
Yeah. And is there much of a difference between how men and women experience the cold water, according to your research? Or is it more an individual thing?
Well, when you say experience, I'm a physiologist, so I look at what happens to the body when you go into cold water. And so we have looked at this from the point of view of the cold shock response. And there are no physiological differences between um, the response that males and females have in terms of the initial exposure to cold water. But we do know that there are very distinct types of groups of cold water swimmers or open water swimmers. You have triathletes, which are mainly men, mainly wetsuited, and then the sort of more classic outdoor swimmer, which may be a wild swimmer, which may be a woman that's wearing a swimming costume or a bathing suit. And so, actually, how people experience it, and hopefully, I'm not providing stereotypes here. And I do want to break down stereotypes, um, but um, people's experiences will be quite different based on the activity and the group that they're in. And so, yeah, it's just trying to find the right group for you. That's the important thing.
We have part of the reason I ask is we have a lot of dipping groups here in Wellington, and I'm in one of them, and a lot of the groups, not all but most, are women who are sort of in their 40s, 50s, and 60s and beyond. And I think some of your research has looked at the effect of cold water on women going through menopause and how it can help with some of the symptoms.
Yeah, so we've surveyed people that were already swimmers and asked them. This is one of those questions where somebody just wrote in and said, "I've been experiencing some quite nasty symptoms of menopause, and I found cold water swimming has really helped with those symptoms." So that's one of those questions where you think, well, let's go. It happens to one person. Let's see what happens for other people. So the research is really basic. It's only on people that already swim. So that's an important thing to say. And all we're trying to do is gather opinion from that group that are already swimming. So what we're not saying is that it could help people that aren't doing it. What we're saying is that these are the experiences of people that already swim, already dip in cold water. And people have said that, particularly for the type of dipping or swimming that they do, that their symptoms of of depression or symptoms of anxiety related to menopause were significantly reduced. And that was sort of the main headline finding from that survey type data.
Cool, thank you. And you mentioned wetsuits before, and I had a question about them. I tend to wear a wetsuit myself when I'm doing a longer swim, and I notice in the colder months that when I'm swimming with a wetsuit, it's almost like all the sort of the cold feeling is concentrated around my head because it's sort of masked around the rest of my body. And I don't know if
Hmm.
you've done any research around not wearing a wetsuit versus wearing a wetsuit and whether wearing one sort of is it as a I'm not sure what I'm asking here, but whether it sort of inhibits the cold water effects and that your body isn't receiving the messages it would receive if you weren't wearing one, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I have done around, and hopefully I'll answer some of your question
Okay.
um, by doing that. Regardless of if you're going into cold water, wear whatever you want to wear. When you go into cold water wearing a wetsuit, what you're doing that wetsuit to work, you have to warm a layer of water against the surface of the skin. So initially, when you go into the cold water, the wetsuit has to fill with cold water. So you still receive the cold shock response. It might not be quite as rapid because by the time the water is filtered into the wetsuit, it takes a bit of time to trickle down your back, doesn't it? Okay, so your cold shock response might be a bit more staggered, but you're still getting a cold shock response. Um, then when you're swimming around, you're going to heat that water up that's trapped against the wetsuit and your surface of your skin. So you're not going to have the same level of a reduction in deep body temperature cooling that you would have from swimming without a wetsuit. Now, we think that most of the potential for benefit occurs around that cold shock response. And so people wearing wetsuits are still getting that cold shock response. What you're not getting is necessarily the level of hypothermia and therefore the level of afterdrop that you would get if you were. So you're getting some of the benefit of where it, you, well, wetsuits are a benefit in lots of ways in terms of speed in the water, extra buoyancy, so safer, but also you're still going to have that cold shock response initially. And then afterdrop will be less problematic as well. So the wetsuit is on the body. You've still got maybe your hands uncovered and possibly your head uncovered as well. And so this is where I think I may answer some of your questions around this. Um, so your head may be naked if it's not got you're not wearing a bonnet, and so you're still going to experience quite significant cooling of that body part in comparison to the rest of your body. Same with your hands and feet as well. They're excellent means of cooling the body by having those exposed. So um, I would, if you're going to wear a wetsuit, I'd also put booties and mitts on as well. And if you can swim with a bonnet as well, to wear that. Um, Getting into cold water can be quite painful, especially if you're going into water temperatures that are less than 8 or 10 degrees. It can be exceptionally painful. So wearing a wetsuit won't reduce that pain, but it might mean that it's manageable for your swim. So I hope I've kind of answered your question, but I'm
That,
not
that
sure I have.
I was going to say that's a perfect answer to my very inarticulate question, so thank you. And related to that, going even colder, um, some people become famous for swimming in extremely cold climates, and I'm thinking here of Lynn Cox, who swam in Antarctica, and Lewis Pugh, I think, who also swam in Antarctica. Are some people more built for swimming at that level, at those temperatures?
Um, yes, I think the short answer is yes. Uh, Particularly, we were all going to experience the cold shock response, and Lynn Cox and Lewis Pugh are two people that have been in so much cold water that they've reduced that cold shock response. to even to very, very cold water, but they will experience it on some level. So once you've knocked out that response, they're also Lewis is quite a fast swimmer. But he's also quite a tall man and quite well built. So he has a certain mass about him that will mean that he's able to retain more of his body heat. He's also quite a quick swimmer as well. So he generates a lot of heat and can store a lot of heat. So he's going to be able to swim quite quickly to do the swim that he's doing in very cold water and then get out. Lynn, like some ladies that swim in very cold water, has some additional insulation that she's using to best effect. So she's a good swimmer, generating heat, lots of body heat, and she's able to retain more of that heat within her body. And so she's able to achieve the swims a little bit slower paced, but she's able to get there because of the sort of favourable body composition that she has for that activity. If you have a much more lean individual, so say take an elite runner, for instance, a long distance runner, they're designed to lose heat. So they're very lean, very muscular, and so a lot of the heat that they generate would if they put them in water, that would leak straight out of their body, and they'd lose heat very, very quickly. So there's definitely a body type and composition and physical activity level that is required to be a good um, uh, swimmer in very cold water.
Thank you. And we talked earlier about the ice swimming championships that you took part in. And in New Zealand, just over the last couple of years, we have our own ice swimming championships that happen in very cold temperatures. So ice swimming, for people who don't know, is below 5 degrees Celsius. Um, and there's such a thing as the ice mile, where people, complete the distance of a mile. And there's now the extreme ice mile, which I believe is more like 2 kilometers. Do
Mhm.
you, you must follow some of these events with interest. Do you envisage that people will continue to increase their distances in lower temperatures of water as they continue to challenge themselves? Is that sort of a pattern you see developing with these
I
events?
do, I do, and yeah, I do know of several attempts to increase the longest distance in water under 5 degrees Celsius as well. So there are people actively training to beat that record at the moment. I think all I'm going to say about that is um, these people have a lot of training and a lot of support, both in terms of the medical support they receive, but also a lot of water safety support. And so this is not something that people should just try and do straight away. They've dedicated many years of their lives to becoming better swimmers first and foremost, but also adapt their body to being in much colder temperature waters. Um, and equally, there are a number of people that have done ice miles or extreme ice miles that have had have had medical problems as a consequence, and so no longer swim in such cold waters. So it's got to be something that is you continually monitor your health around taking part in these things, and it's going to be really important that you remain healthy um, if you're going to do these attempts. It's not a good idea to carry on in such cold water temperatures if you're experiencing health problems as a consequence.
And related to that, I was reading your university website where you talk about it's called the Extreme Environments Laboratory, where you are researching not just cold water, but also humidity and altitudes. So conducting research, and also there are people there who are working on training and endurance. And there was a description about what was called a chamber immersion pool. I was wondering if you could describe what a chamber immersion pool is.
Yeah, so we have a climatic chamber that we can change the air temperature, we can alter the humidity, we can remove the oxygen or part of, to simulate going to altitude. Um, and within that climatic chamber, we also have an endless flume. So we can again, and we can change the water temperature in that flume as well. So we can simulate most of the terrestrial environments on Earth in one climatic chamber.
That's
Um,
amazing.
so we could do cold water swim at Everest Base Camp, for instance, or we can do a cold water swim um, in desert-like conditions. So we have that facility to be able to run controlled experiments using different environmental stresses.
What is the temperature range of the pool?
So we can the temperature of the pool can vary from around 7 if we get it. It takes a long time to do, up to about 40 degrees Celsius. So quite a range on the pool. The air temperatures we can take from around 10 degrees up to 50 degrees Celsius, with relative humidity from around 30% right up to 99 or 100% humidity. So we have quite a range of different environments that we can use.
That's really exciting. And I mentioned earlier that, you've become sort of a go-to person. Been in, well, I've read sort of a few media articles that have interviewed you about the physiological effects of cold water swimming. And I wondered if you had any plans to write your own book about it, about your research and things you've learned.
Um, I've no plans to write a book yet, but I'm still actively researching in the area. We've got a clinical trial coming up that will be writing up fairly soon. So my time at the moment is spent actually actively researching, and which I hope to carry on doing. We've got some water safety research coming out fairly soon around the importance of what we call the float to live message. So my time is mainly spent doing the active data collection and research as opposed to writing up a book. But I'm always happy to come on your podcast occasionally to talk about these things. But no plans as such to write a book yet.
Fair enough. And with your research, it feels like a lot of this research is coming from you and the UK and Portsmouth University. Are there other universities around the world conducting similar research, or is it really mostly where you are?
No, there's several. So I've got colleagues at a local university, well, about 30 miles down the road in Chichester. They're also doing some pretty cool research in looking at water immersion and trying to look at some of the questions that we've not answered yet. So they've picked up those. So that's brilliant that they're running with that, and some of their results will be coming out. So John Kelly is one of the researchers there, and he's doing a lot just with static immersion in cold water. So that's all up and coming. But there's people that do bits and bobs. It's really research is really piecemeal, primarily because of funding. And research relies on funding for a whole host of reasons. And researching something that could be classed as either a hobby or a lifestyle intervention is very difficult to find funding for. So that's possibly the reason behind the lack of research. Um, the main the main research area would be water safety, which obviously with people having accidents or preventable deaths, that's where the funding rightly should go, is to prevent those deaths from happening rather than trying to get more people in the water. We need to stop people having problems. So yeah, we do what we can when we can with the cold water swimming for benefit research.
Is the rate of people getting into the water in the UK as high as it was during the pandemic? Because I know there was quite a steep rise, with people unable, or pools closed, or the places people usually went for their exercise. There were more people just getting into the open water. Are you still seeing an increase in that over the years?
It's hard to say because we know that there was a big explosion of outdoor swimmers or people swimming outdoors during the pandemic, as you rightly say, because of pool closures. And we have what's called an active live survey here in the UK, where people's activity and the type of activity and the regularity is sort of monitored. The data lags massively behind where we are. And so we can just about see that there's been a big increase during the pandemic, and mostly that those individuals that started or we have similar numbers now as we had in the pandemic. So that hasn't really changed. What has changed is the fact that we've had more swimmers have accidents or water-related deaths from entering the water. And so what we're trying to do is an awareness campaign around swimming in the right locations and the hazards of swimming. So we know that lots of people join groups and go swimming, but we also know that there's a lot of people that may swim impulsively, and that's possibly where they get into difficulties as well.
And is that difficulty often in the colder seasons, or is it year round for different reasons?
The, we do tend to see a big spike in water related deaths during the summer holidays, and particularly big spike in deaths around. We have some bank holidays where the air temperature may have spiked, increased, but the water temperatures are still cold. And as we sort of approach World Drowning Prevention Day on the 26th of July, we really need to just sort of highlight that um, anyone can drown, but every death is preventable around outdoor swimming. So we really need to highlight the need for safe um, outdoor swimming.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. We have very high incidence of drowning in New Zealand, being surrounded by water, and particularly in summer. Just more people getting in the water, and often going alone or going into water with strong currents, and not just not having the awareness.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at Water Safety New Zealand's headlines, 2024, you had 71 preventable deaths in New Zealand, and that's lower than the average, but it's still too many.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Heather, we've been talking for almost an hour. You've been so kind at answering all of my random questions. Thank you. What's the best way for people listening to follow your research?
We have a website at Portsmouth, so if you Google Heather Massey, put University of Portsmouth, my research is all our research is all put on that page, and people can follow it there. That's the best way. I don't tend to do much social media. I'm really sorry. I'd rather be in the water than on social media. So
Yeah,
um, yeah, my mum tends to do that for me.
totally get that. Oh, your mum does it for you. I love that. That's awesome. Well, it's important to have a support person.
Definitely, yeah.
And do you swim year round yourself? Um,
Yes, I do. That swimming differs greatly depending on the conditions. So here now in the UK, it's the summer, so we will do extended swims up to a couple of hours, and I've got a channel relay happening fairly soon with some of my good friends that we swim with.
oh,
So
that's
that's
exciting.
we're on what's called the Dover coaster now. So we're literally waiting for the call to go down to Dover. So yeah, we're sorting that out. But in the winter, it will be maximum of a couple of minutes, as possibly you're experiencing right now, and that would be very variable depending on the weather conditions as well. So where we're based, it's very tidal, but it's also very windy, and the combination of the two creates big waves and quite hazardous undercurrents. So we do have to be quite careful about going into the water in those sorts of conditions.
Yeah, good point. Well, all the best with the relay. That sounds, I'd quite like to do a relay as well. It sort of takes the pressure off.
But
Doing it with
it's
a
just
group be
more
fun.
fun.
Yeah, it'd be more
It,
fun.
it it's definitely more fun doing things like that with your friends.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Heather, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure people listening will have learned a lot too. And we'll link to Portsmouth University in the show notes, as well as all your research. Is it the Outdoor Swimming Society website that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
which is really, I know the website you mean, has really good articles about getting into open water swimming, but doing it safely and things
Yeah.
to look out for and ways to prepare. Yeah, so we'll include that.
Yeah.
And
I'm just aware it's a little bit UK centric, but equally they do commission um, articles. So
oh, that's
maybe
good
that
to know.
yourself,
Yeah,
maybe yourself or one of your listeners might want to put something that's a bit more relevant for yourselves up there. But in
yeah.
general, if you people wanting to get advice on going outdoor swimming, it's a good place to start.
Cool. And finally, if you're ever over on this side of the world, please do come for a swim. There are a lot of people
Excellent.
who'd be happy to swim with you.
I've never been to New Zealand. I've only ever made it as far as Australia, but my
Oh,
next
it's
trip
just
will
that
be
little
to.
bit further. Yeah.
I know, yeah, just a little
Next
bit,
time.
but
Yeah. Awesome.
definitely next time.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Heather. Thanks for your time and all the best with the rest of your research, which I'll be following along with.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of Swim Chats. Please remember to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you enjoyed it, you can leave a 5-star rating and review, which helps other people find it too. Enjoy the water, and we'll see you next time.